Morning, friends. Welcome to another meeting of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Today's talk is keys and obstacles to soul progress. And a few words before a student presents that talk. And those few words concern the introduction, basically paraphrasing the Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists, whereby the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is, however, loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. That's simply because the theosophical philosophy is so recondite, so profound, and so vast that the focus here is on the message that was presented by the messenger, H.P. Blavatsky, and those who sent her. Therefore, we have no desire for the external trappings of organizations which lead to dissensions and personality conflicts. It regards as a theosophist all who engage in the true service of humanity without association, without regarding them and looking at them at color, creed, religion, or elsewhere. The readings for today comes from, the quotation book by each, Madam Blavatsky, Mr. Judge, and Mr. Crosby. And for HPB, for today, 12th of April, she states that the Akasha is the eternal divine consciousness which cannot differentiate, have qualities, or act. Action belongs to that which is reflected or mirrored from it. And for Mr. Judge, for today, he states, no theosophist should be silent when he hears evil reports or slanders spread. You must demand good proofs of the assertion and hear both sides impartially. You have no right to believe in evil until you get undeniable proof of the correctness of the statement. And then from Mr. Crosby for today, he says, take what karma brings you and make good use of it. Karma will bring to us what belongs, so there can be no cause for worrying over any future. There is need only that we hold all our powers in readiness to make good use of what is brought to us. And this is best done by a quiet, calm, confident performance of what we are able to do day by day, from day to day. And now we will have the presentation, Keys and Obstacles to Soul Progress.
Welcome, friends. This is a vast topic, but it relates to our everyday lives, our everyday thoughts, and of course, we'll show the link between this and spirit. Just to mention briefly, the portals in the voice of the silence that are the golden keys that the soul traverses, works through to reuniting with that fundamental spirit whom we all are, that thou art, it is said. And we know that they are charity, harmony in word and act, patience, indifference to pleasure and pain, dauntless energy, which suggests something more than just being energetic. Then Dhyana and Prajna. And dhyana leads us to sat, which is true. And so this is something we do on the inner planes as well as the outer planes, but it's difficult to put into words. And this, it says, creates one of bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is one who has renounced the idea of nirvana or liberation for oneself, but like the Buddha, chooses to remain in the world, helping humanity to all achieve that goal, because we are all one. There's a series of articles called Qualifications for Chelaship, and this student is attempting to sort of correlate those with the portals, the paramitas, the divine virtues. And the first one is said is perfect physical health. And we all strive for even a modicum of health, and it's still difficult. But why this is an aid to our soul progress is because the condition of the body in a healthy state is that which best allows the soul to fulfill its dual task of bless you all during this allergy season. Inner purification, and outer service. It's difficult to do these things if we're not healthy, if the body's not healthy. Inner purification, which raises the matter that composes the body to a rarer state of being, and outer service. True discipline demands health, not for our own ease and comfort, but for the sake of helping humanity. Ill health is a concretization of selfishness on some level. Physical health also serves to raise up the elementals, or the lives that compose our body, because they are, it's a living energy. And it is said that all beings, whether in the elemental, plant, animal stage, are to become men, and then after the man stage is the God stage. So to rethink our physical vesture as lives that we have a direct effect on every day with every thought will help us towards service and purification. Check on our inner diet too. One's karma is bound to precipitate itself through the physical body, especially when activated by the force of a resolve in the disciple. We have to use our bodies to practice altruism. So there's the inner altruism towards the lives the body compose, and being healthy in order to do work in the world. The next one, which would correspond to maybe harmony, is mental and physical purity, which allows the God within to be expressed. The quality and motion of the prana, the life energy, which partakes of man's psychic nature, are dependent upon our thoughts. And as man is always thinking, his magnetism undergoes a change for better or worse each hour. As all human beings emanate magnetism, the pure man sweetens the psychic atmosphere around him. His very presence acts as an sort of energization to others. And so how do we purify? The voice of the silence gives us a clue when it says, mind is like a mirror. It gathers dust as it reflects, and it needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek to blend thy mind and soul. In other words, check in on our mental diet and see how is that working, how is that playing out for us. Is it helping us towards a state of purity and realization of the oneness, or is it accentuating the personal self, which is a manifestation of separateness and is opposed to unity and purity? The next one is unselfishness of purpose, or charity. Charity for the sake of others is the most natural manifestation of the Spirit. HPB said, "Were no man to hurt his brother, karma nemesis would have neither cause to work for nor weapons to act through." Through a very long round of births and deaths, men slowly learn that the purpose of life is unselfishness, or altruism. The ordinary people are like passive channels of the law of karma because they're not aware of it. Sort of like the waves and the tide, just sort of moving with the force of the whole mass. But those who aspire to become students, disciples, and chelas have to learn to be active directors of the law, and in the sense that they should ever be on the watch to eschew disharmony and turn the forces of evil or separateness to good, to unity and purity. Courage is another one, and really we can find these in all of the 7 keys. It takes courage to have charity. It takes courage to purify our inner atmosphere. It takes courage to perform service. It takes courage to be patient. It takes courage to be active, to trod this path that, while it's laid out by HPB and the masters, still each person has to tread it themselves. They have their own demons to face, and it takes a lot of courage and daring. And we should do this in our practice extend it towards all of humanity, not just passively enduring our karma, which we still have to face, but finding ways and means to overcome obstacles without injuring others. It takes courage to apply these truths, to investigate our minds, to face our problems. We have to overcome fear, guilt, and doubt. These simply hold us back and are not helpful. It's good to maybe check in with the mind and try to see what the origin is of it. But like something we had from 3rd grade, an idea that we no longer need, and we can discard it and say, this belief, this fear, this is no longer necessary. It is not helping me, is not helping me help others, and therefore I don't need to be attached to it. It just needs to be set aside and move on. If we can be sort of non-emotional about it, it is helpful. Same with guilt and doubt. It's not helping us, and we've made grooves in our mind where those qualities exist, and it's important to root those out. And just like you don't need that ideal you had from 3rd grade, it no longer applies, just let it go. Because fear, guilt, and doubt are rooted in the false mind, the ego. I'm going to read a quote. More on the subject of courage. Here, a great obstacle lies in the grooves already formed in our brains through past thinking. These prevent us from adopting ideas of a different kind, and that would apply just different ideas, but also electromagnetically. We have to learn to get out of the rut each one of us has fallen into by nature, by training, and to fill up the old grooves. For this, mental adaptability is needed. Also, intellectual honesty. The lower self is a clever lawyer who brings forward 100 excuses to justify a wrong course of action. If we listen to its wiles, the mind is subject to delusion, from which results loss of memory, as Krishna says, loss of discrimination, loss of all. To face ourselves as we really are, that is one of the first steps on the path of application, of courage. Dhyana, in this context of the qualifications, was called the star of the soul. Realizing that an intuitional perception of one's being the vehicle of the manifested divine Atman. The purpose of this ideal is to awaken in man a recognition that he's a spirit being. If his false nature, the personality, makes him selfish, and this becomes the root of his troubles, not only for himself, it becomes so for all, because the karma of each is the karma of all, and we are all connected. So whatever difficulty or obstacle we face exists out among others as well. And our overcoming it in ourselves helps all other beings overcome it in themselves. We are on a journey of progressive awakenings, each of which brings the soul into closer proximity to its parent star. The Dian Chohan, we are all connected to one of seven, it is said. And Theosophy is a process of quickening this sort of evolution, and it helps unfold heart perception. The marks of the spirit being are wisdom, compassion, and self-sacrifice. When these are manifested through the body, the latter becomes full of light. This is why we must do this while we're in incarnation. The chela or disciple learns to transcend the personality, not to separate himself from humanity, but to use his vehicles to radiate the light and warmth of the spirit on earthbound souls. It's not only the intuitive perception of the spirit that the chela is required to develop, but the intuitive perception that his soul, that is himself, is the vehicle of the manifested Avalokiteshvara or Atman. And that means the onlooking Lord. HPB explains that in esoteric philosophy, Avaloki, where Avalokiteshvara comes from, Avaloki, the root, the onlooker is the higher self. He is also called the Supreme Lord of the Bodhisattvas, and again described he of the 1,000 eyes. Each aspirant practitioner must recognize the latter when he is ready. All students theoretically know that this is within themselves, that the higher manas can be joined to that. But how many know what its real nature and powers are? By study and contemplation and by application through discipline, we can assimilate the higher manas and come to a level of this type of realization. The last is the truth behind the veil. And this is when, at that highest level, difficult for us to conceive of, the Bodhisattva can see all and understands that this world is a veil in front of true spiritual realms. It requires calm indifference, and this is where indifference to pleasure and pain comes in, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. Calm indifference, but a just appreciation of everything that constitutes the objective and the transitory in this world, and in its relations to the invisible regions. In letters that have helped me, Mr. Judge shows us how this sort of dispassion is to be attained. It is better to acquire a lot of what is called carelessness by the world, but is in reality a calm reliance on the law, and a doing of one's own duty, satisfied that the results must be right no matter what they may be. Think that over and try to make it part of your inner mind that it is no use to worry, that things will be all right no matter what comes, and that you are resolved to do what you see before you and to trust karma for all the rest. This higher carelessness is rooted in the recognition of the divine ego. It's experienced after the student understands intellectually 3 important truths. 1, that everything proceeds from the objective world is transitory, ephemeral, and short-lived. That the spirit in man is unaffected by the events of physical life, and that this earth is a training ground for human souls, and every experience is an avenue for growth. So just to sort of recap some of these things, these are the portals and the keys, but what are some of the obstacles to soul growth? Of course, we mentioned a lot of them, worry, fear, guilt, thinking that that the personality is real, etc. But we could also say that attachment, as Krishna teaches, it's our attachment to ideas and actions that bind us to this world. Attachment and its opposite, aversion, they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin. Dissatisfaction, which is we all experience, have to have compassion for each other. And a realization of the impermanence of the world. Dissatisfaction. We feel dissatisfaction because we think the circumstances are permanent, and we don't realize that it's just sort of a reflection on a pool, and it's going to transform into something else. So how can we work with these obstacles? Meditation can help root out the problems we experience. When we really understand the root of the problem, it'll disappear on its own. Problems exist in the mind, so that is where we have to address them. We learn from suffering from our problems by realizing where it comes from and exactly what it is that is making us suffer. For those of us seeking the nature of causes and effects, problems actually are helpful. If we didn't have problems, we wouldn't learn as much. And that's what we're all here doing. So learning from our problems gives us more energy and a greater understanding. When we overcome something, we feel that sense of, yeah, I can do it. And it also helps us see that problem in other people. It helps develop and awaken the compassion in the heart. Perhaps we should look at a problem we have as, this problem is my teacher. All problems, meaning all other people's problems, are also my teacher. They help me recognize the nature of my attachments. And by recognizing them, we can undo them. Meditation helps us become strong in the face of our problems instead of running away. And that's where we can build skillfulness. With dissatisfaction, no matter how much we get, if we want something, we get it. Have you ever noticed it doesn't satisfy? We always want more or better. So those desires lead to unceasing suffering and emotional frustration, dissatisfaction. For example, if someone came into the room and gave just one person a cake and they ate it, you might be a little upset, like, well, why didn't they share? Instead of being happy for that other person's rejoicing in their enjoyment of the cake, there's this part of us that says, what about me? What about me? What about me? And that's the lower personality, that dissatisfaction, the I wanting everything for itself. When we see this clearly as an attachment, it has less power over us. And there's a story of a monk who was sitting at the table with his bowl in a long line of other people seated getting soup or whatever, and he kept thinking, oh, they're giving out too much, there's not going to be enough left for me. And then when he realized that this was all about me and dissatisfaction and that was an attachment, he turned over his bowl and said, I've already had mine by the time the server got to him. That's supposed to sort of illustrate letting go of the attachment to me and my. The truly rich person has a satisfied mind, is free from attachment. Satisfaction comes from wisdom, not from material things, not from external things. When we're truly free from desires, attachment, and aversion, we'll see that nothing really belongs to us in the first place. We're merely, sort of, it's with us temporarily, and we're like a custodian of it. These things are made up of elementals of lives, and they're depending on us, just like a helpless child would depend on an adult. And in that way, if we see things that way, all the materials we use in our lives, it'll help us awaken compassion for them, because those kingdoms, the elementals, the plants, and the animals, are looking to the human kingdom for help being, raising up to the next level. They look up to us, so to speak. So we have a duty there. So meditation is a practice for helping us to explore our mind and figure out where those attachments and dissatisfaction are, and to root them out at the root, not to just cut the flower off at the top, because then it'll keep regrowing. And what you believe is powerful, and wrong beliefs can perpetuate wrong views. So questioning and coming to groups like Theosophy, where it's been laid out so clearly, can help us get an idea of right views. Ignorance, wrong beliefs leads to ignorance, and like Krishna said, delusion and loss of memory and loss of all. Another example is if one has a child whom one loves dearly and they do something foolish, it's with compassion that we understand that their limited perspective has led them to act foolishly. And we don't make them feel bad about it, we just try to help them. And it is this sort of compassion that we need to have towards others. Instead of directing anger, you know that the child is ignorant and foolish, and it's his narrow point of view. But we're moved to help the deluded and the oppressed, in that if we look at them as if they were our own child and they were just being foolish because they didn't know better. So it's not like we have to work hard to generate compassion. We can see it's already in there, it's innate. And compassion is no attribute, Theosophy says, it is the law of laws. While we have to treat others wisely, we have to treat ourselves wisely too. Searching our mind, observing our emotions and actions becomes a practice, that we can use to sort of undo those mental grooves that hold us in this false scheme that we think is real. And if, like they said, man, know thyself. If you don't know your own mind, misconceptions can arise and prevent you from seeing reality. Instead of pushing away negative emotions when they arise, examine them more closely, like you would a curious object. And then sort of digest the emotion with wisdom. And then you won't blame anyone else for how you feel, because ultimately we're responsible for everything we feel and think. Meditation can seem difficult at first, but you'll never know what your level of attainment will be until you try. Because your mind is obscured now, you don't know what your true potential is. And that's that bravery, that courage, that daring. So when we check our mind and self-study, we don't want to make excuses or rationalize, just investigate and use wisdom to apply to oneself, as if one were that foolish child that just had a narrow point of view. It's a way to practice acting altruistically, and we have to include ourselves in that. So taking care of our body, speech, and mind, guard these doors wisely. As Judge says, words are beings. If we develop enough mental discipline and are sufficiently aware of what's going on in our mind, there's no reason why we can't choose to express only those thoughts and actions which will bring happiness to ourselves and others. We can view everyone as our friend, even as our enemies, as they can be our best teachers. Try to be universal and embrace all others. If it weren't for the continual kindness of others, we would find it impossible to live. Extend observations and practice to others, your friends, your parents, your children. Have compassion for them. Try to live with kindness, patience, and wisdom, and remember, taking care of all beings is an urgent matter. It's not something we should put off to our next life or say, I'm not there yet. If one could imagine a being in suffering and it was one's mother, one would immediately jump to help. But it is said that all beings are potentially like our mother, and we should consider them as preciously as we would someone we love very, dearly and closely. So we have to include ourselves in that. It's an urgent matter. It's not something we should put off for our next life or until we gain this or that. It's something we need to start doing all the time. And it has its own sort of self-reproducing satisfaction, because its satisfaction comes from wisdom, and that is a way to develop and enact wisdom in our lives. So those were some of the keys and obstacles to soul progress, and we'll open it up for questions.
Just a minute, please. Okay. Yep. Where'd it go? Oh, okay.
What must the soul realize first before attempting this path?
What should the soul realize before attempting this path? This student would say it's unity, it's identity with all others, identity with the oversoul, that we are fundamentally unified at a spiritual, psychic, and even though we don't maybe acknowledge it, physical level by sharing the elementals and atoms that we do. perhaps there's more that you want to add?
Well, the general public
Okay.
normally say, I have a soul. But before one can, I think, approach this path, one has to realize that one is a soul. Because according to all of the world religions, the soul can be graced, can be lost or gained. And in this philosophy, if you are a soul, only then can you perhaps be awakened to your inner potentialities. And without that awakening, I don't think one can approach this path.
Excellent point. It's true. A lot of religions do say that you have a soul, and Theosophy makes this distinction that you are, and you have to act from that basis.
So the question becomes, what is a soul?
Well, Theosophy says that there is the animal soul and the human soul and the spiritual soul. And the reason it makes this distinction is because when the mind incarnates, it becomes dual. There's that tending towards the animal nature, towards desires and satisfaction and me, sense of permanence about the personality. And there is the higher aspect of mind, manas, which is the root where the word man comes from, that can be raised up and joined permanently with the spirit, and that is fundamentally our individuality, that which goes from life to life. So it sort of depends on the lens you're looking through, but it seems to this student usually soul with a capital S refers to that individuality, the permanent reincarnating ego. And that is our goal. Once we have co-joined with spirit, so to say, we become aware of and conscious on a universal level, expand our consciousness to become like that of a god, and that is our evolutionary progress.
So then, in the average person's mind, when they think of, oh, you could lose your soul, something like that, what are they, to them, what are they thinking what soul may be?
Well, that belief is certainly pernicious because one feels perhaps that one has made a misdeed too grave to remedy, and that is not consistent with Theosophy. No past misdeed is too bad that one can't overcome it through one's karma, through changing one's thought and action, and one doesn't escape the karma, the cause and effect of whatever that action was. One has to experience that. But we've lived maybe thousands of lives, and there's that idea that you could lose your soul is self-defeating. It doesn't help one continue. People under that belief tend to give up their will, and that's the danger.
As a follow-up, the same sort of question. So also, what then is the distinction between soul and spirit? Because a person would say, that I'm a spirit, versus sometimes saying the soul. Is there a difference between soul and spirit? And if so, what?
What is the difference between soul and spirit? This student would say that spirit ever is, was, and will be. That which is the fundamental ground of all existence, whether physical and material or whether purely spiritual. And soul is that aspect, it's like the vehicle of spirit. And when co-joined with the higher mind, becomes permanent sort of individuality. Would you like to add to it, or someone maybe add to clarify that more?
Well, this student, as you have mentioned, only has seen three aspects mentioned. One is the animal soul, which is astral, and in the ordinary religions, it's not explained that there is a nefesh. Even in the Kabbalistic works, it is mentioned, and in the Egyptian works, it is mentioned. I think it's Ka. And then the human soul, which is the mind. And then Buddhi, which is the spiritual soul, which is the vehicle of Atman, the spirit. To make it clear, HPB does mention that there are soulless people from all walks of life walking the earth, and that we come into contact with them. And she explains that until that joining unification is permanent, we can experience soulless people around us, meaning that the lower personality is so wicked in this particular life, or perhaps it has done wicked things all along and brought it with it in this incarnation, and that its affinity to the higher is lost. And when that happens, it is stated, then it's cut off from the higher light, and then it becomes a curse, because it has become now an animalistic human being, if we can call it human, I'm not sure, and that it becomes a leech on the other entities around. And when it goes into the astral at death, it separates from the physical, it becomes even more dangerous. But not only that, it's going to immediately reincarnate, because there's no spirituality in that soul, if you can call it that, because it's the personality, lower aspect of us. It will come back and continue in that declivity, because there's no affinity to the higher aspect of itself. So the individuality is lost, but that lower aspect lives and can be dangerous to all those human beings.
It's like it was said that the self of matter and the self of spirit can never meet. One of the twain must disappear. And that's the urgency of the message, is that at this time in our evolution, we should be, is suggested, further along in our evolutionary progress. That animals merely want what's better, want what they want. And we as humans can do more than that, using our minds, using that magnificent organ which can be lit up. But it has to be through self-devised and self-induced efforts. And that's where we have to make a conscious change. Or the consequences could be dire for all of humanity. And because we're all one, it becomes every person's issue, not just some other being. Because we're all one, we all have to face this. It's sort of like, climate change or whatever. If it's going to happen, we are all going to experience it, so we all have to be a part of the solution.
That raises a point or a question about this student's line. One is that there's a passage that we hear on Theosophy, also in the Bible, be ye separate. We are all one, but we also have to be separate, because very few people think about what we're talking about today, really. And it's just so fundamentally important. In this fundamental to Theosophy, which is frequently thought of as some philosophy, highfalutin philosophy. Today, you demonstrated that it's not. That it's really every day that we have to think at that level. And it also raises the, this student wants to bring out too, last week the question came up, it kind of relates to what you're talking about too. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? We keep hearing about forever and all the time. Well, the first thing you start thinking about, and that's what the speaker did too, thought about, well, was it the chicken or was it the egg? Well, it really was neither. It was the thought, the divine thought, trickling down, and we touched on a lot of areas today. And I just wanted to make that comment too, because this speaker was the one that was the speaker yesterday, and he heard it from another theosophist this week and wanted to say that it was not the chicken or the egg, it was a thought. The divine thought, through spirit, comes down into spirit and matter. Spirit and matter, you said, can never meet. So if we're totally materialistic, that's where we're going to stay, you know. And you're talking about dragging all of us down with it. Well, we are really in matter now. And as long as we understand that we are spiritual beings first, that we are here as we talked about gods in training all the time. We are gods, whether we realize it or not. And if we aren't going to act like that, there's always that chance that the person who is soulless or whatever will pick up on it and maybe realize that spiritual aspect of them in who they really are. Thank you.
That's where the daring comes in the dauntless energy. We have to dare to take a stand. And it's sort of like tough medicine. We have to face ourselves as we are and apply the remedy. Whether the personality takes offense or not, it's part of what our progress requires, because the mind has this ability of self-reproductive thought. The mind jumps here and jumps there, Patanjali says, and it forms grooves, and it'll continue along that line unless some effort is made to change it. So if one has a grudge or something against a person, maybe checking in one's own mind and saying, holding on to this grudge isn't serving me any longer, and letting it go and excusing the other person because they did their best and they didn't know any better. Letting that go and replacing the anger or the frustration with love is planting the seeds of wisdom in one's own mind, mental garden, so to speak, and they will bloom and help us take more steps like that. And they're really just basic, but most of the work we need to do is within oneself.
One idea that was presented in some of the articles that a student read was that perhaps suppression at first, trying to control it, is a good way to start, because in that particular article it said that until the human being, as you have explained, is able to turn inward and look to see where the seed is, it has to know where the emotion is and why the attachment is there. Before doing that, you cannot get rid of the seed. But Mr. Judge says we have to learn to suppress it. And for instance, anger. You cannot just get rid of it that easily, because as you have said, the grooves have been cut in the brain, and it's become an automatic reaction. So in order to not to be reactive, then you have to learn to suppress it and go inside and ask as to why that attachment, why that response is coming out from you. I don't think it's that easy to get rid of it. Until you question it, you have to learn to suppress it, and then eventually when you find out what the seed is, then you can get rid of it. But it's not that easy, because in this phase of our civilization, that attachment has become craving. And a lot of people crave things, And it's not just material goods, but it has also gone towards food. Because you said health is extremely important. Our children also are obese. And it's a tremendously important subject. Thank you for addressing it.
How is it that we can say that words are beings?
Well,
B-E-I.
how can we say that words are beings?
Beings, not beans.
Plant those beans. Words are beings. Because speaking is an action, a thought preceded it. A thought was the stimulus for the action of the words. And we know it's, sound waves coming out of, someone's mouth organ and entering your ear organ, and those vibrations are received. Sound is based on, mathematical precision. It is electromagnetic. It is a vibration. And it said the Buddha, when he spoke, didn't always say the same thing to every person because he knew what they needed to hear. And he taught the devas, men, and gods, at the same time. They heard the message that they needed to hear. So someone like that has perfected the power of speech. But for us, speech is communicating a thought, and it carries a motivation. Every action. What's the motive behind your action? Is it to impart peace? Is it to make someone feel bad? Or, whatever it is. We all do it accidentally. So checking our motivation, but the substance in which we interact in the physical world is made up of elementals, and William Q. Judge writes a lot about elementals and says that they form pictures in the astral of what we're thinking. So even before it's said, that thought has crystallized into a form and exists on subtler levels of matter. But matter's made up of elementals, beings of light. There are 3 kingdoms, so they, according to HPB, there's a vast, we don't know a lot about them, just what she's told us, but basically those elementals are carrying the message, the intention, the motivation behind the words. And it disperses, not just to the person who heard it. It's not like if you talk to one person privately in a room, that the effect doesn't ripple out through all of the astral plane. It does. So it would have to. It's not like that it works that way. It's a unified field, so to speak. So it gets into a lot of maybe abstruse things, but I think we can all relate to the fact that the motivation is real behind the action, and that has its effect, even if you clothe it in nice words. You can't fool yourself. You can't fool the astral light. It's an accurate mirror of our thoughts and actions. So it's very real. Our thoughts are even perhaps more real than speech, because it's at that more noetic, more mind level. Yeah, someone.
Quick comment or question before I pass the mic on. This student is thinking, well, speech is more than sounds that come out of somebody's mouth. I mean, that's why you would kind of sometimes get a dual meaning. You can look in somebody's eyes and get a sense of where they're at, and what comes out of their mouth sometimes doesn't really mean anything, because there's more there's a lot of ways you can speak to somebody. That's just a comment. Pass it on now.
Well, one word that came to mind as you were responding was entity, and that there creates the form and thus the being. And we know that beings are associated with some sort of force. So it's not just a being, but there's some kind of force. Just like you mentioned, if you speak angrily, you create some sort of ripple, some kind of force you're sending out. If you speak in a humorous manner, it's still a force that's affecting, that can create laughter or anger. And it's this entity that's formed as a result of that thought, which is the result, well, which speech is the result of that thought. So, and that's that entity being, or whatever word you want to call it on that level.
Clothes itself with that intention.
I wanted to mention one word. Impress. Because you said elementals, and we're impressing them with our thought and speech. And so we're giving it life. And the more you're thinking on the same lines, the stronger the impress becomes, and eventually becomes permanent. So you have created an elemental with that impress. So it is real. And the other thing is, as you explained, it is impressed onto the Akashic light as well, and then it reflects on all of humanity from there. So it is very important to watch our speech, because HPB says a speech is divine and it is sacred. It comes from the logoic light, and they mention 4 different aspects of that light: Pasyanti, Madhyama, Para aspect, and Vakharivak, which is the speech that human beings use. So it comes from a divine source, it is divine, and it needs to be used very carefully.
And it's speech including actions too. I've often heard it. Actions. Yeah, it is an action, but action meaning something. If somebody says something and does another, that's what the student was getting at just now. That is really speech. That's my understanding anyway.
We should think of our thoughts as speech, because as matter, spirit becomes involved in matter, matter becomes more rarefied, and spirit releases itself from matter. Communication will be using more those subtle mental powers. Speech won't be necessary. Yeah.
Since we're talking on speech, this last thought here for me. So when people are talking to themselves, you see that a lot. So what's going on there? Is it the need to turn inward and speak to that self, or is it just rambling, or what? What's your take on that? Just generally, people, you find people mumbling to themselves, and generally, the public mind is something's wrong with that person that's talking to themselves. Are you crazy? Something like that. And then sometimes, as long as you don't answer yourself. So what, from a theosophical point, is going on there when people, and mostly everybody does it at some point in time anyway?
Yeah, the student would say that it depends. There's a wide range of reasons why someone would talk to themselves. It can run the gamut of all human experience. It could be to help one organize one's thoughts. It could be
Who are they speaking to?
themselves.
But I mean,
The
are they aware?
personality?
I mean, if they're not aware of the higher self that Theosophy, or that there's a higher nature that Theosophy talks about, so are they saying they're talking to some aspect of from their perspective? Are they talking to the ego, or just
Probably the ego.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not aware of these things and mumbling. That's one thing that could be addressed as purposeful speech. Mumbling would not come under that category of guarding that gateway of what goes, what comes out, what goes in for one's mental diet, what comes out as speech. Giving up useless speech would be another key, another helpful thing that one could do. It's interesting that you brought that up. Okay, I guess we'll end for the day, and you want to make the announcement?
Yeah, next week's presentation is Life and Illusion. Kind of sounds like a continuation of some of this. And thank you all for joining us. And if you can get to the Bethesda area, we'd love to see you. Please come to visit us here at the address indicated at the bottom of the platform there. Thank you.